So new witnesses are expected to take the stand at the High Court in Pretoria at Senzo Meyiwa's murder trial. Defense lawyers Advocate Zandile Mshololo and Advocate Thobane yesterday wrapped up their cross-examination of forensic detective Seargent Thabo Mosia. They pointed to contradictions between what Mosia previously told the court and a statement by Brigadier Johan Ndlovu, who was one of the first officers at the scene. Ndlovu passed away before the trial began. But for more on this, let's cross now to our SABC News reporter who's been keeping a very close eye on this for us, Chriselda Lewis in Pretoria. Chriselda, a very good morning to you. A big day yesterday. Finally, we saw that testimony by Sergeant Mosia come to an end.
Well, that's right, Lady. Cross-examination had wrapped up yesterday, and key to what we've seen since his testimony throughout the cross-examination as well, a lot of focus being put on the manner in which police had handled the crime scene on arrival in Mshololo, and how that basically stored some of the crucial evidence that was taken from there. You would recall, of course, that a concession that Mosia had made was that the scene had not been properly handled. Also, when we got the opportunity to speak to him yesterday, but this is also something that he'd mentioned inside court, was that he was quite perturbed and also said it raised many questions why he was only called to the crime scene 4 hours after the fact. So those were some of the key issues that came out of this. Also in cross-examination, he was also asked about how he had stored some of the items that he found at the scene. And essentially, one which he had stored in an envelope. He was asked whether he had sealed that evidence before leaving the crime scene after the first instance when he had reported to it. He said he'd made the mistake of not taking a photograph of that envelope after he had put the piece of evidence inside it. And many questions, of course, have been raised about, you would know, right in the beginning of his testimony, when he was asked by the then advocate who was representing accused 1 to 4, Advocate Chriselda Lewis, about a meeting of high-profile persons that also took place in Mshololo, where high-ranking police officers, as well as the then MEC of Community Safety, were also spoke to after her name had been mentioned inside court. There are a lot of allegations about, why certain things were done in a particular way at the crime scene. And also, crucially, what also came out of it was that he also conceded that while he was one of the first police officers also to arrive at the crime scene, he did not take swabs from the hands of any of the individuals that were inside the house at the time that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. Also yesterday, in cross-examination, what we heard from him when he was also asked whether, when he left the crime scene the first time around, whether he knew or he could recall where any of the occupants who were inside the house at the time that Senzo Meyiwa was killed, does he know where he left the occupants in the house? He says he could not remember. So many questions raised about how police had conducted themselves at the crime scene, whether they had done a procedurally thorough job in ensuring that the scene itself had been properly concealed. Those that were inside the house were told to move to certain areas. And, him really saying, coming back to what you raised, Naledi, when you talk about the statement of Brigadier Johan Ndlovu, is that you recall that Mosia had told this court that when he received a telephone call from Brigadier Ndlovu, he did not receive the address, or was not told where the address of the crime scene was. He'd gone to the hospital. Instead, that's where Senzo Meyiwa was declared dead. And in a statement to the contrary, this Brigadier Ndlovu says that he had given the address to Mosia and basically did not point out anywhere at the crime scene where he should take photographs or conduct his investigation, because Ndlovu says he didn't feel the need to do that because he was not in charge of that particular crime scene. So you have Mosia on the one hand saying that he received multiple assistance from Brigadier Ndlovu, and this Brigadier Ndlovu at some point had handed the scene over to him, And on the other hand, Mosia stating that he actually received that assistance from them. So we're expecting a new witness to take the stand this morning after that cross-examination was completed.
We'll be watching very, very closely. Chriselda, thank you so much for keeping us updated on the Senzo Meyiwa trial. Our reporter there in Pretoria, Chriselda Lewis.